Hi kids, I'm Darcy Logan. I work here at Casa. You'll usually find me here helping artists put up their artwork for display, but I'm also a bit of an artist myself, so I'm going to take the time to show you how, well maybe not show you, give you some tips, techniques and tricks for doing maybe a self-portrait watercolor or maybe a portrait of someone close to you, like your mom or your dad. But I'm going to talk about self-portraits. And this is one that I did a little earlier today. And I did it without my glasses so I could see myself. But I'm just going to kind of copy this one so I don't have to keep looking away into a mirror. So the first thing we're going to do is your watercolor cakes might be a bit dry. So I want you to go in, always use clean water, and just put a drop on your paints. Now, all paints have pigments that are usually, well, not always, but quite often come from naturally occurring materials, minerals, plants, things like that. And some paints, like oils or acrylics, are bound with different materials. A binder is what holds the pigment and puts it into a useful form. So acrylics have a binder of polymer or plastic. Oil paints have a binder of an oil emulsion. But gum arabic is used for watercolor paints, which means that when they're totally dry, you're able to make them soluble again or make them take water so that you can apply them. So we're just going to let those sit for a moment. Now, when you're doing a portrait, and you'll notice this even if you're looking in a mirror, and if you have a mirror to look at, that's great, that there's a few tips for doing a portrait. And you can lightly sketch yours out in advance if you want with a pencil. I'm going to go a little bit darker than I normally would just so that the camera up here can see it. A head starts with an oval. And you want it to take up quite a bit of the page. That's kind of an oval. And when you're doing a portrait, there's usually two traditional ways. One's straight on, and the other one is called a three-quarter profile. And you'll see that in lots of art historical images. That means that you can see the partial profile, and that's what I'm going to do. So you start with an oval. And did you ever wonder when you're drawing a portrait where your eyes go? Well, if you take your oval and divide it in half, that's kind of where the eyes go. And if you divide that again between the eyes and the chin, that's where your nose goes. And divide that space again, and that's where the mouth will end up going. As you can see, it's gone into proportion. And always you have ears, and where there's ears, there's hair. And I have a bit of a goofy haircut because I haven't been able to go to the haircutters lately. Oh. So I'll draw in my goofy haircut. All right. So your eyes are also little almonds. And if you were to take the measurement of that eye, an eye is an eye space apart, your two eyes, if that makes any sense. So eye, so that means the other one will go about into here. And goes the nose. And let's give a cheek. Right. And a mouth. You always have a neck and shoulders. So that's kind of the basic compositional elements of a portrait. And always, critically, when you're doing your portrait, give yourself a shirt. Because you don't want people thinking you're painting shirtless. Okay. So if you're looking in the mirror or even seeing a photo, if you look really closely, you'll notice that there's some areas of the face that are lighter and some areas that are darker. There's shadows and highlight is what they're called. And that's what gives a painting value. And a value is a range of things from dark to light, which make things look three-dimensional. That's how you start to give form to things. So we're going to start with the shadows by doing a little bit of wet into wet in kind of the darker area. So there's a darker area to the side of the nose because the light's coming in this way, and kind of around the eyes. So this we're just putting on the clear, clean water. And you're going to get just, it doesn't have to be a lot, just a little bit of the blue. You don't necessarily want it heavily saturated at this point. This is going to be and it's a matter of, once you know these kind of proportions, a little bit of just keeping track as you look in your mirror to see where these shadows and highlights are. So let's add in, make it just a little bit darker under the nose. And it's all right, because we're going to start blending other things into it. So a little bit dark under my hairline. And around my mouth. There we go. So I'm just putting in the areas that are going to be, oh, made a mistake. There's no mistakes. You can just kind of rub that off because it doesn't matter. A little bit of dark in the ear. Under the ear. There we go. So we've got in kind of started, it's called sketching in. That's where you put down your immediate ideas and your immediate observations. And we've put those in. We've put in that blue, which is going to represent the dark areas of our face and our portrait. So clean off your brush and get some more nice clean water. And we're going to start wetting near those areas, still the areas that are in closer to what you'd call mid-tone. So they're not in the darkest shadow, but they're not quite in the light. And those are going to end up being a bit mauve, and we're wetting all the area adjacent to what were our darker tones, because we're going to be adding a little bit of a red just to allow them to mix. Now you don't want a lot necessarily on your brush. You just want to start adding. Because unless you've been swallowing silver nitrate, your skin's not going to be blue. But it'll always have some warmth in it. Or I guess if you're really cold. So add and allow those. Because if you know what happens when you mix red and blue, you get purple. And so we have that red going from purple, and we want it to go through to the red, because then we're going to add another color. And do you know what color that is? What color do you think we're going to add to the red? We're going to start adding yellows to make it kind of orange. and then we'll start building up highlights from there. And I have to work pretty quickly because I've been told that I don't have all day to paint these. But if you come and take one of our classes here, you can spend a lot of time working on your paintings. And at home too. Just because I'm rushing through it doesn't mean that you have to. Hopefully you'll take away a few little tips and tricks and techniques so you can spend some time making a really cool, great one at home. So we're just going to try and start to get most of our underpainting done. And the underpainting is the first painting. So I'm going to add water and start to pull in some yellow ochre. You could use like a regular yellow, but I find the regular yellow is maybe just a little too pigment heavy at this point, or too vibrant. And what we're doing is more of an expressive style portrait, because we're not using a lot of local color. And what local color is the colors that you think something is. You think the sky is blue, you think skin is kind of pinky, but when you start to look really close, it's usually none of those things. It's just because we've built up what we call a gestalt, or this idea of what something is in our mind. Make sure if you're following along and seeing where the light's hitting. So I have a hair dryer to dry mine because I've got to go a little bit quicker. And if you have a hair dryer at home too, you can put it on a high heat setting, but the low blow setting because you don't want to blow all your paint around. If not, you can just take a little bit of time and let it dry. I'm going to take just a quick break and I'm going to just dry what we have here right now. There, so I've just dried it off a little bit. Like I say, you can blow dry yours at home or just let it air dry. And it's going to ripple and bubble a bit just because the fibers of the paper have been saturated with moisture. But it should flatten. You can tape the corners if it's necessary. And when the painting's totally done, you can put it under heavy objects like some books, and that'll help flatten it as well. So we are going to add in a few darker colors, especially around the side of the nose and around the eyes and in the ear. So to do that, I'm going to go with kind of a darker purple that I'm going to make. That's just by adding blue and the red. Put in all your kind of darker areas. You can blend those out. And there's no right way or wrong way to make a piece of art. There is only your way, and your way is the right way if you like it. That's starting to come along. soften out some of these areas here. That's coming along. It's just a matter of looking and observing and seeing where you want areas to be darker, where you want it to have more shadow. And then just putting it in. If you need to mix a little bit more, remember, add some first, clean off your brush before you dip it into the next color. There we go. Mine's starting to look pretty stern, but I'm not that stern of a guy. It's just the nature of how this painting's turning out, because they all turn out different. You don't want to forget eyebrows. Those are critical, because we all have them, and if someone doesn't, I don't mean to offend you. Most of us have eyebrows. So let's put them in. And I'll go ahead and darken those up when I come back to it. Now, I have a very conventional looking haircut right now, and I kind of got gray hair, so I'm going to make myself kind of a brown-gray haircut. And I'm making that just by the same way. Most of it, I'm working with what's called a limited palette when you paint. And a limited palette means that you use just a very few colors, and those colors can be mixed and combined to make a bunch of other colors. But you can use all of the colors of the rainbow if you want. That's up to you. That's your prerogative and your choice. That's right. My very boring conventional haircut goes in here. That's lots of painting here. There we go. Take some of that out. I'm just going to give it a quick hit with the hairdryer. That should be good enough for what I need to do. I just want to go in any little areas you want to make darker. You got to make darker, but also we want to make sure that we get our pupils, which are dark. So I am going to combine. I'll show you another way to make a dark one. I'm going to combine a little bit of the green and a little bit of that red. Oh, you can see how that goes quite dark and quite gray. Because red and green are opposites on the color wheel, so when you mix them together, they don't complement one another. They go muddy, but sometimes that's a great way to make dark colors. Sometimes you want to add black, and you can add black, but in nature we don't see a lot of black. We think it's black, but it's dark reds and mauves and purples. So let's put in your pupils. And this portrait, he's kind of looking backwards. Get And once it dries, you can go ahead and add other stains and washes and glazes of color. As you can see, it's a bit different. Everyone's a little bit different. I think I worked a little bit quicker on this one, and the colors aren't quite as rich. But I wanted to try and show you how some of the proportions of the face work. So the last thing I'm going to do, and I think it's one of the most critical things to do, put the shirt on. And I'm going to give myself, because I was wearing a brown shirt yesterday, I'm going to give myself a brown shirt. So I can't wait to show you. Aaron is one of our great instructors here, and he's painting along with me. And his will be too wet to be able to show you immediately, but we'll get you some footage and show you what Aaron did as he worked along. Because I think it's important to see how everybody's piece of artwork is going to be completely different, but they're all going to be amazing. So the last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to call this done, is I'm going to sign it, because artists sign their work and then they put the date. There you go, and I hope you learned a few little tips, tricks, and techniques so that you can go ahead and do all sorts of different drawing and learning how to put the face into proportion. Thanks, and happy painting.